season of light. It seems like only a few years ago, and you know, you get to be my age, and honestly, those years seem closer and closer together, less far away and right here, but this was a little while ago. A friend of mine in seminary asked if I could pick up her grandson from kindergarten, and I said sure. She called and made those arrangements, and so I picked him up and got back, and she was a minister also. We sat at the kitchen table and talked and carried on, I'm sure, quite a bit about Epiphany. Pretty soon here comes her grandson running and screaming through the house, Epiphany, Epiphany! It's all about taillights and flashlights, whatever. And so we just sat there and laughed in kind of stunned amazement for the moment. And so today I will add to that candlelight, fog lights, track lights, spotlights, and even some people would throw in Bud Light. I would. Welcome to the 6th Sunday of Epiphany. Let us pray. Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on us this morning. Open our eyes and our ears so that we might perhaps come to know you and know your love in a much more intimate way. And now may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be exceedingly blessed in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. 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 In today's gospel, we find Jesus coming away from a place that he loves. I would imagine that Jesus was one of the people that we know now to be introvert extroverts. And so that extrovert person side of him could work a crowd like none other, could get up and teach and could wing it and talk and preach. But then when he was done, he was done. That introvert side took over and he had to go away. And he had to go and take in all that he had experienced, all that he had reasoned with, all that had come his way through all of these people, places, and things. And so we find him in the early days of his ministry, just immediately following the calling and naming of his disciples, then journeying down that mountainside to the plain where life actually takes place. In those valleys, in those pits and places of just the yuck as well as the joy, where we come even today. Jesus' disciples were, I'm sure he had so many lessons to teach them as we see in our gospel lessons throughout the year, but now it was the beginning. It was the moment of the great reflection, of the great theophanies, of the great revelations as they sat and as they listened to him. And then when he started probably reminding them of the great lawgiver Moses that also went up on a mountaintop and came back down with the laws, the commandments, the thou shalts and the thou shalt nots. He set in order his own laws with the beginning, soon to come, to love your neighbor, to love each other, to love yourself, and to be able to move forward in that type of living, in that type of love. It was a totally different way of seeing life, of seeing issues, and of handling them as well. Even as I have loved you. I'm sure that he got started with that early. I'd like for you to hear this scripture lesson in a little bit more current terms or wording or verbiage from the Message, Eugene Peterson's. Coming down off the mountain with them, he stood on a plain surrounded by his disciples and was soon joined by a huge congregation from all over Judea and Jerusalem, even from the seaside towns of Tyre and Sidon. They had come both to hear him and to be cured of their ailments. Those disturbed by evil spirits were healed. Everyone was trying to touch him, so much energy surging from him, so many people healed. Then he spoke. You're blessed when you've lost it all. God's kingdom is there for the finding. You're blessed when you're ravenously hungry, because then you're ready for the messianic meal. You're blessed when tears flow freely, because then you recognize that joy truly comes in the morning. Count yourself blessed every time someone cuts you down or throws you out, every time someone smears or blackens your name, or just simply to discredit me. What it means is that the truth is too close for comfort, and that that person is truly uncomfortable. You can be glad when that happens. Skip like a lamb if you like, for even though they don't like it, I do. And all heaven applauds. And know that you are in good company. My preachers and witnesses have always been treated like this. But it's trouble ahead if you think that you've got it made. When you have what you have is all that you'll ever get. And it's trouble ahead if you're satisfied with yourself, for self will not satisfy you for long. And it's trouble ahead if you think life's all fun and games. You know the truth. There's suffering to be met, and you're going to meet it. There's trouble ahead when you live only for the approval of others, saying what flatters them, doing what indulges them. Popularity contests are not truth contests. Look at how many scoundrel preachers were approved by your ancestors. Your task is to be true, not popular. Jesus stepped forward with these different images of how to deal with life and how to deal with people. Not so much going along in accordance with what had been sent forward in the laws prior to this, but again, to just stop and to do simple things, just to listen, to allow people to come up and touch him, to allow people to just be in his presence, to listen to those people. Just small opportunities to be in touch with life and with people in general. Mountaintop experiences are places of remembrance for us, where when all sorts of things break loose, we can draw in the light that we have gathered, not just from ourselves, yes, from these epiphanies, these moments of light, these moments where the light bulbs come on in our minds and in our very souls, but also what we gather from each other. Those are the times that we think that we have to hold these in, that nobody will recognize us. We tend to doubt ourselves as human beings. And instead of going out and sharing what we've learned or what we've gleaned or what we've gained and how we have been assisted with these gifts of God, we tend to worry about what's coming next. How do I get ready, and will I have to live from one epiphany to another? One message from God or a gift to another, and what if I never get another one? What will I do? What if? You know, those what ifs, as you know, they just about never really happen. And then when they do, what we're able to do is reach in and draw from those experiences where we can truly say, with the help of our communities of love, we know we've been there and we've done that. And we know that it actually does get better. Whatever these simple places are, they're also very serious places to be, because we are affecting everybody's life, everyone that comes into our own presence. Even in communion, we're given and extended a loaf of bread, a simple loaf of bread, but it's broken, and it's extended to each and every one of us. And in doing that, we become community, we become family, we become the gathering that is truly blessed, that is truly nurtured and nourished, and extended the invitation then to move forward into God's community outside of these walls, bringing others into a sense of the laws of love. We are. Each time the gospel is shared, we come together to assist each other. When we take part in communion today, you'll hear me use a few different words, especially in the beginning. What I say is, and I remember someone different. I say, 6 days after he was anointed, and then I go into Jesus called his disciples together for one last meal. And I do that because in the Gospels, there's a story in each one of the Gospels, and each one it's different. But it talks about a woman who was there at one of the gatherings that Jesus attended, whether it was this home of Simon the leper, or the home of Mary and Martha and Lazarus, whichever one, there was a woman who either took a jar, a bottle of costly perfume, and anointed Jesus with it, either his head, or she knelt at his feet and anointed his feet with her tears and her hair. Of course, the disciples had a fit and said, you know what, this is ridiculous. We could have taken that money and given it to the poor. And you remember Jesus' words, you'll always have the poor with you, but you won't always have me. So every time the gospel is recalled in all of the world, this woman's story will also be remembered. One small act will be remembered. The giving to others. We don't know what others are going through each day, do we? We really don't. I don't know your stories. And even if I did know your stories, I wouldn't know what happened to you prior to walking through the door. But what I do know is that I can offer something as small as a handshake or a smile. You remember those, they were depression or stress indicators that back in the 70s, 80s, even into the 90s, Time magazine ran an article that you were able to check off the boxes of all of the stresses of the prior year. You remember these. And it would tell you whether you were going to drop dead that moment, pretty close, or, you know, if you were going to be a candidate for some terrible illness or whatever. You know, we would sit there, and I remember checking those boxes off, and, you know, for a move, there was a certain amount of points. For a divorce, for a marriage, for a birth, for a new relationship, for a new job, for an increase in salary, just for anything and everything. There was this tremendous listing of these boxes to check, and you could tell all about who you were and what you were doing. Again, that's drawn into us, you know, more and more. What we're called to do today is to step outside of our own checked boxes and into the lives of others. Not having any clue or preconceptions or notions of what is and what has been in their world, or anything for that matter, but just to know that this person is a child of God, and that for whatever reason you have been called to be in that person's presence. And perhaps you're the one to light that person's path. Years ago, in one of my other lifetimes, I was a mission interpreter with the China program of the United Methodist General Board of Global Ministries. And so I would travel around to different groups and give China talks. And I would give talks in churches all across the United States on China yesterday and today. So I would go in and I would give talks. I was also a church biographer. And I wrote about women who had served in South China, 1884 to 1946, through one of the churches that now make up part of the United Methodist Church. And so people would come up and they would have all of these comments. They would remember some of the people that I talked about, or none of the people. But I remember once a lady came up in Southern California in a church, and she said, you know, I really need to talk to you. I feel this connection between us. And I said, well, okay. You know, and she said, could I have your phone number and call you? And I said, certainly, certainly. So I gave her that phone number, not knowing what this woman, she was 85 years old, she told me later, what she would have to tell, but I knew it would be some kind of story. You know, when somebody approaches you like that, just put on your seatbelt and get ready. And that's what she did for me. And she called a couple of weeks later. I thought maybe I would never hear from her again, but sure enough, she called and she said, you know, I've had this experience and I just need to share it with someone. And she said, for all of my life, I have lived with other people. I've never been alone. I went from my family's home to being married to my spouse's home, our home together. My spouse went off to war, and I went off with the in-laws. And so I lived with my in-laws. And then when my spouse came back, we raised a family. We had children. So I had, again, a house full of people. And it's not been until recently that my husband died that I am now totally alone. And I really didn't know what to do with myself. And she said, you know, one night after my family had gone home, she said, I was sitting there and I walked around the house, and she said, I knew that my children had to go back to their lives, but I didn't know what I would do. And she said, I was so scared. I didn't know how to interact or relate or anything on this level anymore. She said, I was totally lost. I went around, I locked windows that I knew were already locked. I checked the doors over and over and over. And she said, to the point where I was just exhausted. I thought I would lie down and read a book. And she said, I couldn't do that, and I just wept. And she said, I sat there, and all I could do was cry out, please help me. Please help me. She said, Ellen, I'll tell you, she said, I'm not one of those kind of people. You know, that can mean anything for us. That really could mean anything. So I said, what do you mean, one of those kind of people? And she said, you know, I don't hear voices. My life isn't filled with drama. And she said, but you know, she said, all of a sudden I felt this warmth inside of me. And where I had put my robe, around that chair I saw this bright light. And I felt like I had heard the words, you will never be alone, ever. Don't be afraid. She said, you know, she said, from that point on, she said, I am no longer afraid of much of anything. She said, friends wanted me to have a gun in the house. She said, that was the last thing I needed. She said, but I had something better. I had the Spirit of God that was right there with me. And she said, I don't even know why I'm telling you this. She said, really, I don't know. And I said, you know what? You may never know that. But I can certainly bet that one day I will. One day. 12 years down the road, I became a hospice chaplain in West Texas. And guess what? That was one of the stories that I shared over and over and over with my patients and their family members. Their partners, their spouses had passed away, and they did not know what to do with themselves. They felt so totally alone. So 12 years prior to, this lady approached me in a foreign place to me, Southern California, and said, I need to tell you a story. We are called, my sisters and brothers, to listen. We're called to hold hands. We're called to smile. We're called to wink every now and then, simply to let people know what she let me know, and then I could therefore tell her story. Jesus could tell this woman's story years down the track. As you experience the crazy vicissitudes of life, the ups and downs that sometimes grab us and almost refuse to let us go, sometimes we wonder how we're going to do it, I want you to remember that you're not alone at all in this journey. You're not. Look for the good. Be open to revelations. Be open to epiphanies, not just within yourself, but in the lives of others. And then don't hold them in secretly, but share them. Share them, especially when the invitation is there. Hold on. Remember to turn on your own flashlights, your own headlights, your own candlelight, whatever it is that God has gifted you with, that is part of the core of your very being, so that you may become a guide to others in need. So blessed are you, dear ones, who gather the light and extend it to others. Amen.
Amen.
So this is a song actually by Wilder Atkins, if y'all are interested in looking him up. I think he's pretty cool. I think you all got to see a video a couple weeks ago of it. I'm interested to see what video you all saw. There's one in particular where it paints a portrait of Martin Luther King Jr., very similar to how Jesus has been painted in the past, with, you know, the beautiful crown halo in the background and the dove. It brings a little joy to my heart, and I'm hoping me playing it brings a little joy to yours. Peace, it don't come easy. Love, it don't come free. Martin Luther King said, Lord, I have a dream. Boys and girls of every color walking side by side. Brother, sister, come on, turn that darkness into light. Well, I was born into the heart of Dixieland. Holy rollers in the hills of Birmingham, and all the summers spent just chasing lightning bugs by night. Heavy stillness in the heat of August and July. Lord, a wind was stirring from the east to west, set my heart ablazing deep down in my chest. And I heard that preacher crying out from 16th Street. Till we all have freedom, there is no one truly free. On into September, heard the people say things just won't get better. 4 girls died today, but we will rise up singing, truly we shall overcome. And we won't quit singing till that day of glory comes. Peace, it don't come easy. Love, it don't come free. Martin Luther King said, Lord, I have a dream. Boys and girls of every color walking side by side. Brother, sister, come on, turn that darkness into light. Brother, sister, come on, turn that darkness into